Okay, in this video we're starting our section on annuities and loans. So you will need those pages of your notes and your formula chart. So annuities deal with things like car payments and house payments where we want to find monthly payments. So if we look at our formula chart, we're just going to be using one formula here. So let's go ahead and write that formula down for number 1. Okay, so I want to make sure when I write this down that I'm also writing down the parentheses. And most of these numbers we've seen before, we've worked with I and we've worked with N. So the A is going to be the amount that we're financing, so the amount that we're borrowing. For number 1, we're buying a car. It sells for $15,000, but you're making a $1,000 down payment. So if we think about the amount of money we're going to have to borrow, we're going to take off our down payment. Okay, so we're going to be borrowing $14,000. All right, so that's going to be our A. We also need to find I. This will be the same as it was for compound interest. It's the rate divided by the number of times compounded a year. So the rate is 6%. So here's little r. We're compounding monthly. So M is 12. So remember, we do have to write this as a decimal. And I'm not going to get an approximation for this. I'm just going to leave it as a fraction. All right, we also need N. This is M times T. Remember, T is our time in years. Okay, so here are all of our important numbers from our problem. All right, so we're compounding 12 times a year for 5 years. So in this type of problem, N also gives you the number of payments. All right, so if we're going to pay every month for 5 years, we're going to pay a total of 60 payments. All right, so now we're ready to plug all this into the formula. Now remember, for credit, you need the formula, the plugged in values, and the answer. And I'm going to keep my parentheses. I'm borrowing $14,000. I'm going to multiply that by 0.06 divided by 12. And I'm going to close those parentheses. On the bottom, oops, I missed a 1 right there on my formula. I have parentheses 1 minus, parentheses 1 plus. I'm going to put I in again. I'm going to close those parentheses, and then notice it's raised to the negative n, so that's going to be negative 60. So the trick to putting this in your calculator correctly is to make sure that you're getting all the parentheses. So notice we've got 2 sets of parentheses in the numerator, and we've got 2 in the denominator. So we want to be really careful that we get those put into the calculator correctly. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and enter the numerator. So parenthesis 14,000, parenthesis 0.06 divided by 12, close, close. So that takes care of the numerator. Hit your divide. Parenthesis 1 minus, parenthesis 1 plus, 0.06 divided by 12. I'm going to close the first parenthesis. I'm going to raise it to a negative power. So you have to use the negative button, not the minus button. So that'll be negative 60. And then I'm going to close that last set of parentheses. If you do this and you get an error or an overflow error, this usually means you missed a parenthesis, so you don't have the same number of opening and closing parentheses. Now keep in mind this is a car payment, so that looks like a reasonable value. We're going to round this to 66 cents. So our monthly payment will be $270.66. And so that seems like a fairly reasonable amount for a car payment. Now for part B, we don't get a formula for this, so we're going to kind of common sense our way through it. If we want to know how much interest we had to pay over the life of the loan, we should take the total that we paid, and we're going to subtract off the loan amount. All right, and whatever the difference is, that should be the interest. Now, if we think about total paid, that's going to be our monthly payment times 60. All right, because we're going to make this payment a total of 60 times. So let's go ahead and get that number in there. So 270.66 times 60. So we're going to pay in total for the car $16,239.60. So I'm going to write that number down. And then we want to subtract off the loan amount. Now remember, we did make a down payment on the car, so we only borrowed $14,000. And then we're going to take the difference, and that comes out to be $2,239.60. Okay, so that one doesn't have a formula. It's just kind of a common sense amount. If you take the total you paid minus off how much you borrowed for the car, whatever the difference is going to have to be your interest.